Do you see how hip this thing is? Put it on the floor, press the button, and it becomes a pre-existential dread Tony Hawk. Isn't he the greatest? Video game prototypes have really been the talk of the town in these past few months, especially with stuff like happening recently. There's an instinctual fascination with these things. We've grown so accustomed to how these games are that we couldn't imagine them any different, and yet here they are being any different. It's crazy how wildly some of our favorite games changed from their original reveal to what we got to play. They practically look like new content at times. More of a game we already love. I personally would pay $1 million to play the E3 demo of Luigi's Mansion, or at least I would if Nintendo would respond to my emails. There's a mysterious aura around the low quality footage and what you see in said footage that truly inspires your imagination. No matter how many times I watched trailers for games that ended up not even resembling the final product, like Conker's 12 Tales or Earthworm Jim 3D, I get the chills. And then of course there's the games that were cancelled altogether. Looking at a game that we can't play in any form at all, it's a really strange feeling. Like yeah, I'm thoroughly disappointed like everyone else that Nippa Nut was cut from Paper Mario, but the fact I can't play Sonic Extreme at all has given me many sleepless nights. Damn it, I spent the night thinking about Sonic Extreme again. But in terms of prototypes, what people seem to care the most about is anything Nintendo, and there's 3 reasons why that is. 1. It's Nintendo. 2. They keep that stuff on lockdown harder than any other company. Sure, we're given pre-release info and there have occasionally been prototypes found of their games, but they would never give us new footage of a game's beta like some other companies have, and the prototypes found are usually just a work in progress of a localization, rather than an in-development version of the Japanese release, meaning the differences are usually minimal. And third, did you know that Super Mario 64 wasn't supposed to be the final name of Super Mario 64? Isn't that just f***ed up? It feels like Nintendo has only gotten more and more strict as to what they're willing to show to the public. Games like Sound Fantasy for the Super Nintendo and Earthbound 64 for the Nintendo 64 were shown off in depth, yet never saw the light of day, but ever since the Wii era, if you see a game revealed on Nintendo's website or on the E3 showroom floor, chances are it's eventually going to be released in some form. They've had intense secrecy on their projects in recent years, likely due to how easy it is for information to get leaked with that whole internet thing that people use. However, I feel like the main exception to Nintendo's secrecy is Kirby. Now as a kid, Kirby was no contest my favorite video game character. Whether he looked like this, or this, I loved him, and I still do. How could you not love a character so consistent in being a circle? I had all the games in the series that were available at the time. Kirby 64, Air Ride, Amazing Mirror, Nightmare in Dreamland, and Canvas Curse. To this very day, those are probably my 5 favorite Kirby games ever made, and no, I will not look up the definition of rose-colored glasses. Each one offered entirely different gameplay concepts and ideas, while still having the trademark polish, charm, and fun that's to be expected from the Kirby. But if I had to pick one, Kirby 64. Having the Crystal Shards as your favorite Kirby game would be a criminal offense according to most people, but I absolutely adore this game. It's much slower than his other outings, but the pace allowed for a much more different experience. Kirby often gives you the ability to float over your obstacles or at least skip most of them, but everything that 64 puts in your path has to be dealt with in one way or another. Not to mention the ability to combine copy abilities was a brilliant mechanic that led to so much experimentation, and it left the best abilities feeling like a real reward instead of just being overpowered. There's not much of that aging thing here that most N64 games have. Just look at how crisp my Kirby 64 looks, meanwhile my Ocarina of Time isn't looking too hot. The point is, I loved Kirby, but there was something I, along with many other people, were consciously awaiting, and that was the next mainline console entry into the Kirby franchise. Yet there was no sign of anything like that for quite a while. Come 2005, the Wii was just a year behind. It seemed like the time for a new Kirby game to come out on the Gamecube was running out. But, come E3 that year, there was a trailer dropped, and it started off with a bang. Oh my god, it's Kirby. Here it finally was, looking as beautiful as expected. It started off with Kirby wielding his basic sword ability that was absent from Kirby 64, and using it to attack a golem, an enemy type that was only just introduced in Amazing Mirror, in what appears to be some kind of destructed castle. That's followed up by showing off Kirby using Hammer, again another ability absent from Kirby 64, attacking 2 bonkers in presumably a mini-boss room. And then Kirby's on the beach with a new ability. Bubbles. Up until this point in the trailer, it seemed that it would be more or less similar in gameplay to Kirby 64, but with many older mechanics and characters reintegrated into the game. This was further confirmed when the next clip made it clear as day that the co-op friends mechanic was returning from Superstar. And honestly, that's perfect because I already removed the last 2 controller ports off my Gamecube, figuring I'll never need them. For the first time in the series, there was going to be 4-player co-op, and that was certainly one of the most interesting things shown off in the trailer. But let's not ignore the fact that the scenery and enemies seen in these clips are just really cool. There were also 2 bosses shown off in the trailer, one being a giant DDD robot and the other being Wispy Woods, of course. Both of them were appearing pretty grand, but not nearly as grand as the music used in this trailer. I want this to play at my funeral. Of course, alongside the trailer, there were a number of screenshots put out. There's Kirby sucking, Kirby swinging, Kirby swimming, Kirby jumping, Kirby umbrellaing, Kirby zapping, Kirby firing, Kirby contemplating, Kirby swimming again, Kirby punching, Kirby jumping after swimming, Kirby attacking by umbrellaing, and 4 different images of Kirby riding on his friends. A feature that was missing entirely from the trailer, which is a bit strange. Almost as if it wasn't functional enough to show an actual gameplay. But hey, the game looked phenomenal and quite gorgeous too, and the game's release date was TBA. That's my least favorite acronym. Now's probably as good a time as ever to discuss why this game is called Kirby Adventure, and the answer is I have absolutely no idea. I couldn't find a single official source calling the game Kirby Adventure, and I don't like the name either way. Take Kirby's Adventure, remove the apostrophe S, boom, entirely different name, good job guys. Besides the name Kirby Adventure, the game also seems to go by the names Kirby GCN and Kirby Untitled, which is my personal favorite name for the game because I misread it as Untitled as a kid and I thought that sounded cool. But anyway, 2006 eventually came and so did the Wii, and there was a Kirby game, just not the one we expected. Kirby Squeak Squad was released on the Nintendo DS, and it was a Kirby game. Honestly, it felt like something that existed solely to hold us over until Kirby Adventure released, which was now who knows when because releasing it on the Gamecube was completely out of the question. And from that point onward, we got a few signs of it, but we also got some signs telling those other signs to f*** off. But thank God the year 2011 exists. Here it finally was, after 6 whole years. Kirby Wii. Maybe Kirby Adventure wasn't that bad a name after all. But here it finally was. A mainline Kirby Adventure was coming to Nintendo's latest console. For real this time. And it got released. Under the name Kirby's Return to Dreamland, because Kirby Adventure was just too stupid of a name, especially when there was already a game called Kirby's Adventure, and it was obvious that the Wii in the title was just a placeholder for a real name. Oh. So all's good then, yes? The next mainline console entry was finally out, and it was a pretty good game, so I would have no reason to dwell on Kirby Adventure anymore if I was ever taught to appreciate what I have. Once Return to Dreamland released, it seemed to be widely accepted that despite being quite a bit different from Kirby Adventure, this was still the same game we saw way back in 2005. For features that were seen in Kirby Adventure that were absent from Return to Dreamland, a lot of them were re-implemented in future Kirby games, but oops, fast forward 7 years later and Kirby Star Allies releases, featuring a huge focus on 4-player co-op and the Friends mechanic, just like Kirby Adventure. So 12 years later, Kirby Adventure was actually Star Allies all along, right? No. No, that's really stupid. It actually confuses me that there's like no one else clamoring to play this game, because I believe Kirby Adventure is much in the same vein as Earthbound 64. It was a major project that fell through due to the dying out of its intended console, or because of other issues, only to be retooled into something wildly different. And you may say, how is this wildly different? Both have Kirby walking in a 2-dimensional plane with 4 players simultaneous. That's what it would have said on the back of the box. How is this not the same? Well, let's take a closer look at not only the original trailer, but the development history of the game. Luckily, when Return to Dreamland released, there was an Iwata Asks interview released detailing the development struggles of them trying to make another Kirby game, bringing to light entirely new information while also bringing out some weird inconsistencies. The main takeaway from the interview was that 2 more Kirby games we had no idea about were in development before Return to Dreamland released. A fully 3D one that couldn't achieve the quality we hoped for, and a completely flat 2-dimensional side-scroller with an art style reminiscent of a pop-up book. And while them showing us 2 completely unknown Kirby games that we can never ever play is pretty cool and also somewhat crushing, There are some other interesting details hidden in this interview. They state the fact it's been 11 years since Kirby 64, the last main entry Kirby game, and then start discussing Kirby GCN. Shigefumi Kawase, the game's producer, mentions that the trouble with the game came from trying to make a game that was both multiplayer and single player, so that was, as we figured, a major focus during development, and explains why the idea was re-implemented in Return to Dreamland and Star Allies even after such a long time. The strangest part of the whole interview, however, is that while the game was revealed to the public in 2005, Iwata states that had Kirby GCN came out, it would have released soon after Air Ride. Now I know the meaning of soon differs from person to person. You look up the definition of soon, it says in a short time. You look up the word short, it means in a small distance. You look up the word small, it says a size that is less than normal, so according to a then 51-year-old man, 2 years may be a soon, small, short, or less than normal amount of time. But it still does raise some questions. Given that the storybook and 3D Kirby games were in development after Kirby GCN, we can make the assumption that for 2005 to 2011, in that time they worked on 2 entirely different projects and then took some of their assets from Kirby Adventure to create Kirby's Return to Dreamland. But that also means for 2000 to 2005, all we have to show for those years is the unfinished Kirby Adventure. Now obviously you could say Air Ride accounts for 3 of those years as well, but the soon after Air Ride statement implies that Adventure was in the works alongside Air Ride, and additionally was being readied for release much sooner than when we finally saw it. This is further supported by one of the first statements made by Kawase in this interview. Right after Kirby 64, we immediately began working on a new Kirby game. There's a good chance that in 2003, 2 years prior to Adventure's reveal, the game looked entirely, or at least somewhat different. My point is, a lot can change in just a few years, so what are the chances that Adventure and Return to Dreamland are the same game when there was a 6-year gap between reveal and release? Finally, going back to the original trailer and images, it just simply doesn't look like Return to Dreamland to me at all. Return to Dreamland was a pretty flat game visually, and I don't mean that it looks bad, it looks wonderful even. I just mean it lacks depth. Sure, the graphics are 3D, but to put it in a way that might offend some people, the levels look like they could be made with a level editor. It's like it was put together brick by brick, and you know that's fine. Most Kirby games are like that. But Kirby Adventure didn't seem to follow that trend. They look like they have real scenery and atmosphere to them, like you're not just playing through a level, you're making way through a factory or running through the ruins of a castle. It looks like a real world, a full 3-dimensional environment to explore even though you're on a 2-dimensional path. And the only other game in the series to also do this was Kirby 64. That's not all that Adventure took from 64 though. Judging by the footage, it seemed that the speed was going to be a middle ground between Return to Dreamland and Kirby 64. 64 used its slow speed in combination with some dynamic camera angles to really show off the game's set pieces, and there's a few parts in the Adventure trailer that did the same thing. It's not impossible that Adventure was going to follow a very similar design philosophy to Kirby 64. You may say because Star Allies, Return to Dreamland, and Adventure all had to focus on 4-player co-op, that the design would have been closer to those games. But again, the co-op was what gave them so much trouble during development, so it's more likely that 4-player co-op just didn't work with the Kirby 64 way of doing things. I guess the simplest way I could put it is that when I look at Kirby Adventure, I don't see the prototype of Kirby's Return to Dreamland or Kirby Star Allies, I see Kirby 64 too. And that's something we simply never got. And after all these years, something I still want to play. Why won't Nintendo give me what I want? The fact that I can't play Kirby Adventure is causing me incredibly minor distress. Do you know what distress is? It's stress with DI at the beginning.